Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's well. Hope everyone is good. Tuesday, the 5th of August, and I think it's fair to say that we're actually entering the period that, the slog, whatever you want to call it, in terms of Bitcoin's price action. Sort of notoriously the end of the summer, August, September, never particularly good months for Bitcoin. So we're going to sort of dive into that, just have a look and see why is it so difficult for Bitcoin and Bitcoin's price action. Are there any signs to suggest that this time it's going to be any different? And then ultimately where this may take us going on into the future. I don't really have too much else to talk about. No real news that particularly garnered any interest. Yes, we had the jobs data that's get revised, and we've had more talk on tariff. But to be honest with you, the markets have played out off the back of both of those, and we just continue to see how that plays out. I am running a little bit of a poll this time. It's going to be a bit of a regular poll over the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably do one in Discord as well. But if you can just contribute to it, it's just going to help. I'm just thinking about something I'm going to talk about at the cuddle, and it'll be just worthwhile just sort of garner where people's portfolios currently sit right now, as we are, I don't know, a year and a bit into this uptick on Bitcoin and where that currently sits with it. So without any further ado, we're going to dive right in. As always, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and I will chat with them as I can. Noticing I'm looking particularly red tinged on the camera today, but we'll worry about that another time. Charts as we can see them at the moment. So Bitcoin on the 3-day time frame, continuing this ever so slight sort of, not an ever so slight breakdown, but that loss of 117,000 that we kind of experienced. Main crux of that falling on Friday, consolidated over the weekend, and then we're starting to see that sort of continue and retesting the bottoms at the moment around about 113,000. We'll have a look as to where that goes and perhaps why that 113,000 was a good turnaround point. But as we say, 3-day time frames, much bigger scale. We're still above that 109,600 kind of level, which is sort of a significant point from an all-time high. And then sort of where candles closed in and around the last all-time high, and that sort of like holding period between May and June. So we're still above that. We're kind of midway between the two levels. So on a 3-day time frame, not getting too much direction. We'll try and see how that one plays out a little bit later on. In terms of Bitcoin dominance on the left-hand side, again, we had that big fall down a couple of Fridays ago. I think I drew this trend line at the moment. This goes all the way back to December 22. We've hit that one kind of perfectly. We've been bouncing and consolidating in and around that. In and itself, that doesn't really tell us if we are going to make that move back up. But as I mentioned last week about whether or not I'm sort of really wanting to swap my Bitcoin into alts, we haven't lost this key level right now. And so for me, that's a very hard decision to try and do. I'm just going to sit on my hands and wait and just sort of see if we can lose this level or when we lose this level before making that decision. Moving on to total 2 in the middle there. Again, we similar to Bitcoin, I suppose. We had that move up to almost 1.6 trillion, but we've started to see that fall away. Not quite as bad as what it was on Friday. We've seen some recovery, but as the Bitcoin dominance has kind of indicated to us, we are still, we still haven't quite crossed that hurdle yet and effectively just standing ground. So we have a look at things like the Ethereum ETF in a moment. But I don't think there's anything too much to indicate where that's going. You could argue, similar with Bitcoin, I didn't bother drawing it on because it's a little clunky, but there might be some form of falling channel sort of in and around here, and we just sort of play that out until we find that conclusion. That would typically be a bullish setup, but ultimately we've just got to wait to see how that one's going to look. And then we look at BitTensor, and I'll blow it up on the bigger screen because I drew these yellow lines on Friday, and I know it kind of looks a little bit messy there. So these white ones are just ones we've had on the charts for months. The yellow ones, I was just trying to have a look, especially where we were, back in the last week. We kind of clearing up to this and we rejected from it. And it kind of feels at the moment that maybe we're heading back down to that sort of 310 level, which, as we see on other charts, is sort of quite a significant level. The Gandalf line, you shall not pass, whatever it is that you want to ultimately call it. And we've seen that base that formed in and around sort of 320 to 315, kind of coinciding with the bottom of this channel. So that's sort of the areas that I am looking to watch. You could argue we did lose this white support line or resistance line again. It only natural we've come back down. We've kind of clipped it. I appreciate 3-day time frame is not as accurate as you might like. Had some sort of reaction from it. Is that a dead cat bounce? Whatever, we'll have a look in a moment. And now we're now just continuing on that move back down. Again, the daily and lower time frames are going to give us a better indication of those. So right, let's just get straight into August. And I think the easiest way to kind of picture how bad August and September can be is to just have a look at the Bitcoin monthly returns. I appreciate this is just for Bitcoin. We're not looking into how this impacts altcoins and everything else, but you can kind of see the month of August is one of the worst months for Bitcoin historically. Out of the 5, 10, 13 that we've got here, 9 of 13, including this month, are red months. And we're not talking about small figures either. Even last year, nearly a 9% drop. Year before that, just over 11, and then a 14% drop in 2022. So certainly the last 4 years, and for some of us, that might be the only 4 years that you have experienced a crypto market, we have seen a drawdown in the month of August. And so I suppose it's just about managing our expectations and just getting settled in that, we might see a negative this month. Now, we'll have a look and we'll try and draw out some of these ranges to see how far it could go down based on the start of this month and some of these figures down here. But I suppose, let's try and be a little bit optimistic, because the one thing that I will say is, let me just get a drawing tool. If you look at 2013, 2027, and 2021, so they were all peak bull market years. And actually, funnily enough, they were all green. And so the argument could be said, well, wait, 2025 is peak bull run year, 4-year cycle, if you're still buying into that. And so although we're red at the moment, is that actually we're only 5 days into it, give us a chance to breathe, and we may actually get to see that this is going to turn green. Now, I would argue that we mentioned last month that July, not that great, but in bull runs, that's the year, that's sort of the bull years. That is the month that we really start to see the difference here. And if we could then get another green, especially in a particularly bloody month like August here, I think it really is starting to paint that picture that actually we may start to see one of these huge October rallies, Halloween rallies, whatever it is that you want to call them, that we get to see in other months. So definitely something to just sort of keep an eye on. Obviously, August is only 5 days old at the moment, so we can't really take this month with a pinch of salt. But if you were to just look at this casual and say, where's it going to go, you would hazard that it's actually probably going to fall red, and that doesn't necessarily matter. The last 3 years that we've had red, or certainly 2 years, we've had red months followed immediately by very strong green months there. So again, prepare yourself potentially for some drawdown, but actually know that typically we get out of this low, whether it be a September start, but certainly into October, and we start to make back a lot of those gains. And we really do, and why is that not removing itself? I'm not sure. Comparatively to, some of the losses that August makes, sort of 8%, 11%, we have a look, retrospectively 7% September, 10, almost 11% in October 2023. Okay, didn't make much back in September, but then almost a whopping 30% in October. We've had a 40% in recent history in October, another 30%, almost 50%. You can see some really big numbers there, which can actually start to help bring back some of those portfolios. So we start to just have a look at this on the chart. We might come back to that a little bit later. But we do kind of paint that picture, we're on the weekly time frame here. But if we go back, you can kind of see we had this period down. And then where did it end? It ended sort of September. We got this move back up. And look, I appreciate there may be news narratives in there that might have driven that across with, sort of the resurgence of Trump's campaign, the dropping out of President Biden, all that kind of stuff, getting very crypto friendly, whatever. Ultimately, the turnaround was end of August, beginning of September. You go back, into 2023, August, bit of a red month there. September, just double doing this now. September, start of the recovery back up, and then a strong 6 months. Again, We had a lot more narrative then about the ETFs getting formally signed off and all that, and I get it. That's certainly going to help push that through. We have a look at 2022. Didn't work out. We're in a bear market, still on the descend. No bueno there. We go through to 2021 now, and again, similar kind of picture. I mean, actually, you could argue this one started end of July. We had a pullback in August, but it was still part of the upswing. And then September took us on that final run to 69,000. You're going to get the point, but 2020, August, down here, a little bit of a pullback right at the end, and then September takes Bitcoin on that run from 10,000 up to 40 odd before the end of the year. So look, it does kind of seem to always play out that way. I say always, except for 2022, bear market, whole of the market systems were all going down there. It was a miracle we actually even sort of managed to keep our head above water after what we had in 2022. I mean, FTX hadn't happened, but it was bubbling under the surface. We certainly had 3 Hours Capital and Terra Luna collapse down here. So yeah, that sort of like says to me, well, actually then, you know, I don't know why I didn't give it that one either. Let me just delete that. This kind of starts to make sense, you know, even in the picture that we painted in 2022, July saw us that nice move, sorry, 2021, July saw that nice move up, August that pullback, September helped move it along. And then, you know, what have we had? We had that nice move up end of June, but pretty much July, pulling back into end of July and August, setting ourselves up wherever this pullback may be for that next move up, and up we go. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is going to be the last move up, because that isn't known at the moment. But looking back on where we've been, all that normally happens is that we recharge ourselves, Bitcoin's price recharges itself, profit is taken over the summer, the price comes back down, buyers come back in, and then we move it up for a leg. And yes, previously, historically, it had led to blow off tops, or certainly tops of markets where we get to. So that's something to absolutely consider, but that is for another time. We'll look at that a little bit more when, I would say if, but when we get this move September into October, as to how long we potentially have left with that move. I'm going to look at sort of some of the other things with Bitcoin's price, going across onto sort of the standard chart that I kind of start with for Bitcoin, 12-hour time frame. A little bit messy, it's got the EMAs on here. Let's just take those off for now. But because we're August, we've updated it a little bit. Now, this grayed out area here, previous liquidity. I mean, this is why I draw them on, and I get rid of them after they've been hit. But you know how many times these hit. But this, you know, just smack bang perfectly on Friday. Just went clean straight through the remainder, cleared it out, came back up, took it out again. I mean, it was already gone by then, but you can kind of see just was a target, got to the bottom of it. And these aren't the most accurate. Obviously, I just take them off high block and round them up. Sorry, it's not high block, it's CoinAnk. And then we've come back up before again. So that's why I have them on there, because they are just good targets. There's no guarantee on time frames, but in terms of positions, if you're looking to long or short, they give you a great indication that you can just add to other things. And then we start to look, well, where is the rest of this liquidity forming? And we've got some long liquidation zones in and around that 111 to 110,000. 110,000 pretty much lying on this fib level point, 2, which we've been waiting to retest for some time, and this is starting to feel potentially like a bit of a dead cat bounce at the moment. I think I'd like to see another candle tomorrow as to where this actually goes. But it was a nice rise yesterday, a Sunday and yesterday, but we've fallen away quite quickly. This was almost an engulfing candle. We've still got 5 hours to go on it, but it is some sort of recovery going on at the moment. But yeah, I'm certainly thinking that this seems to be a very high probability target now, tying that in with the 2 on the Fibonacci, and then also having a look at sort of previous all-time highs. I think that's something that we need to consider. Speaking of previous all-time highs, and if you just take this onto the daily now, we'll go back to that other chart in a moment. But if you just have a look, so the all-time high that was made in May 22, that got us smack bang up to, what was that? 12, just over 12,000. And just look where the move over the weekend has come back down to. It's come back down, retested the previous all-time high, found a good level of support from there, managed to bounce from it. Now we may get a second retest of that. May just be some sort of, right hand side of a W that's forming. We'll have a look at those on the lower time frames. But this isn't the first time we've seen this kind of price action happen before. Matter of fact, if we go back to what happened in April of this year, we had this big move up past 100k, consolidation period, as you know, here, and then we had that move back down, and we got all the way down to around about 74,000. We put that line on here, sorry, and then you look across, and where's that hit? I mean, okay, it missed it by $300-400, but it's pretty much the all-time high from March of 2024. So again, we came back down, retested that price action there. Now this felt aggressive. This felt end of the world with this move all the way back down, particularly under the guise of tariffs coming in. The whole market was suffering there, and that sort of gave a good indication this was probably an ideal area for turning around, just because the fear was so high. But we did come back, we did retest it, and again, we get to this one here. Okay, it's happened sooner, and you know what? The distance it's had to go is nowhere near as far, so it's not really screaming necessarily the end of the world. But I certainly don't hear many people talking about that alt season that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago as much at the moment. That seems to have cooled off. That narrative seems to have cooled off, and I think people are certainly feeling the pinch in altcoins as it's coming down. So that's typically always a good area to start considering whether or not you want to start buying. The other thing that I did mention on Friday, but if you weren't watching it, fair enough, but we had the close of that CME gap. So again, 95% of all CME gaps seem to close with Bitcoin. This one was only a matter of time. I talked about it the moment it formed. We thought that the CME gap at some stage would close. We've had that close now. Doesn't mean it's going to stop the rot, but we just kind of knew that was an area that we could look to buy, and lo and behold, that's why I set some buys for Bitcoin for this month. Back to BTC on here. I think that's, wow. Okay, so what I will do now is I'll just keep it on this time frame at the moment, but we've seen that level there, and then we can start to think, okay, I'm doing this on a cleaner chart. I know sometimes I do it on the other charts, but it can be a bit messy. It's really working on that there, and I think, well, maybe it's probably a bit too long a distance. We've gone from the 9th of April to where we are now, so if we move it sort of wick to wick, what's that give us? Kind of gives an indication. Okay, there are some levels here. I think this, have I got on the right one? No, sorry, here we go. There are some levels that I would consider looking at. This move from wick to wick, we can see when we got to the 618, nice support, came up, broke through the 0.5, fair enough, but the 382 held us for a while, then up, sorry, this white line is actually right smack on the 236. We've seen it move there. It then takes a batter and comes all the way back down to the 0.5, comes back up, retest, finally breaks through. And now what we do, we've hit this level, we've come back, and the 236 is exactly on the previous all-time high, but also where we found support. So a fairly good indication at the moment. Now, the 236 is not one that I typically put my hat on. I more look at the golden ones. I think I've explained that enough. But we can now see why we did find some form of bounce on that there. So again, something else to consider. And now when we throw this back on with the 12-hour time frame, you kind of have a look at the 50 and the 20 EMA. So the 20 EMA is orange and the 50 is blue. And you can see, okay, we lost both of these. And we talked about how that 50 EMA on the daily, I'm not talking about the weekly now, end of a bull market. So I'm just talking about general support, 50 EMA. It's on the 12-hour, not the daily, but it's come back several times, hit it, and it's been able to hold it. We suddenly lost it. And then what's happened? We've come back, we've bounced, we've talked about why we may have bounced on fib levels and previous all-time highs, but look where we turned around, right smack on where the 20 and the 50 EMA converging onto each other. And we've seen that rejection, a fairly clean rejection from that level. And so the battle now begins. And when we get down on the live time frames with some of the other EMAs, we can just see how difficult that potential battle is ultimately going to be. So yeah, something to certainly consider with, what have I done there? Bitcoin over the next few days, I suppose. On Friday, we can have another look as to where that has gone. In terms of getting onto the ETS, well, after weeks of Ethereum purchasing on the ETFs. We actually saw yesterday as a rather large exodus on the ETF. $465 million worth of spot ether was sold via the ETFs. The vast majority of that, I think over 300 million, came from BlackRock. So, ultimately at 375 million, profit taking or potentially market scared. We've got to remember the data reset on Friday. Wasn't much of a reaction from BlackRock on Friday. Maybe they sent all of their traders home for the day. But certainly woke up Monday having that reaction to the market, and there does seem to be quite a few sells that has gone through. It's not just limited to Ethereum. Again, Friday was a bad day, 812 million overall, but BlackRock absolutely next to nothing. It's like they were asleep at the wheel. And then we saw yesterday 323 million in total, and almost 300 million of that coming from BlackRock. So, that reaction to the job data or the backdating of the job data or the implications that may be on rate cuts or whatever it was that's gone and spooked the markets has been shown across the board. Heads up to who sent me this link in Discord. This is just a CoinAng, which I do use, but I just didn't realize I had a page that does the ETFs. This details all the ETFs, gives you the actual price of the ETFs. And then the changes, but it shows you the holdings as well. Obviously, I use this other one, which can be a little bit convoluted to look at. So thank you for that. I will continue to look at it. But if you want to, just go into CoinAnk and just hit ETFs. But yeah, the Arkham data that I use, unless you know where you're looking, it can be a little bit confusing there. Although it is ever so slightly different. 740,000 BTC balance for BlackRock versus 738,000. So maybe not quite up to date. Don't know which one's right. Doesn't necessarily matter, I suppose. In terms of alt season, Bitcoin season, I mentioned again on Friday, we had that push right back down, and alt seasons, they burn bright, they burn fast. And we didn't quite get above that 60 level, and we've started to come back down. Again, we're almost sitting in no man's land, 49 at the moment. For me, no real discernible direction right now. If this was a chart, I'd want to see it get above 60. That getting above 60 is certainly going to have impact on Bitcoin dominance, which then may give me the impetus to actually start considering some. But also do remember with Bitcoin dominance chart, and I don't think I've drawn it on here, but I will just quickly bring it up. It's not just that 60 level. We've also got this level at 55 that we kind of need to, take out. So that's why I sort of went through in a bit of detail last week. There's still plenty to be made between losing 60 and 55. So there's obviously an opportunity there, but we lose 55 and then we really are talking about that alt season. Anyway, that was last week's video. If you missed it, just go back and have a look. Nothing's really changed from that. We get on to the fear and greed. No, we don't, because it's not there. Whoa. Sorry, let's try that one again. We get onto the fear and greed index. Well, it's relatively stable, sitting at 60 in a bull year. That's nothing too bad. Slightly cooling off, and even last week we never quite got to extreme greed of 75, but nothing necessarily too bad, which sort of goes back to that comment that actually, that fall from all-time high of 123 to the previous all-time high of 112, it's happened quickly, and there wasn't really too much fear about it. And again, the fear and greed index is clearly showing that. We can kind of see on these charts here, we sort of hung around that 70 level for the best part of the last couple of months. We've come back down. Again, we've seen some fear down in the low 60s, which is a similar place that we've been to throughout April and May. And in that time, still managed to keep on getting new all-time highs. So potentially a good buying opportunity in and around this area. If you're just looking at the fear and greed, again, going to CoinMarketCap, their fear and greed index is around about 55. So again, nothing too much to worry about in that. Thank you everyone for contributing on the poll. We'll have a bit of a chat about that later on, but thank you. Right, I only got one question on the Avenger call, and it was, I hadn't even thought to look at this for ages, but thanks for bringing it up. Harry, thoughts on the bearish divergence on the weekly RSI, and how would you play this. So I was like, okay, well, I don't really look at the RSIs anymore. I put it on. I'm pretty certain you meant the RSI, but I put the stochastic RSI on as well. And you didn't give any dates, but I think this bearish RSI fairly easily stands out for itself. So we can kind of see linear chart just so I can get the touch of tops, but no, it doesn't. Put it back on the logarithmic. Then you get the gist of this. What we're seeing is that over the same period, the price of BTC has continued to rise, yet the relative strength index has continued to fall. This is a bearish divergence, a fairly simple one to ultimately see there. And what it is effectively suggesting, for those who aren't aware, is that, you know, we are running out of steam within the market, particularly on a weekly time frame. It's a pretty strong time frame and indicator. So it's something that we should at least sit up and watch. Now, how do you play this? My honest opinion is you can't really. An RSI doesn't give you an indication of time as to when it's going to happen. Just at some stage, price will break and will form a lower high. Lower high. Thank you. I'm thinking about that. And we'll be like, oh yeah, that bearish divergence has finally played out. But it at least gives us a warning signal that something is going on. But you've got to remember, this is the best part of 18 months this has taken to effectively play out. Matter of fact, this bearish divergence is forming over the entire span of the ETF. So yes, there was a surge in interest in and around the launch of the ETF, which would have driven that strength even on the weekly time frame massively up. The ETFs have continued to buy, but that excitement and that furore around it is probably not continued because, you know, it's just a standard news story now. It doesn't even really make the news, and so that interest is kind of waned. And I go back to the point that the reason that this cycle feels different is because it is still institutionally driven. It is still very much Bitcoin is in the spotlight through institutions, through nation states, etc. And whilst retail are interested, we're not really bringing in the mass amount of retails that we would hope at this stage. Matter of fact, if we have a look at sort of the spot retail activity through trading frequency, you can kind of see at the start of the ETF, as we talked about, it was high. It's this red splurge here, which I'm now trying to move out of the way, which sort of coincides with this increased level in March of 2024. But actually since then, I've lost where it is. We haven't really seen any hotspots, either in highs or lows, that have sort of said that retail are coming in and that trading volume is increasing because of it. So yeah, we're just sort of losing that interest that goes there. Now, this could break and we could find that actually we get a massive spike up and then suddenly we're like, okay, well, that one didn't play out. But generally they do. And if we have a look at the last bull cycle, we did have one. We had one. It's hard to draw in a straight line, but we had from here, here, and here represented this, this, and this. So that was moving. Oh, that's not going to work. So that was. Oh, I can't do a straight line. Save my life here. That was moving down, whilst this one was moving up. I can't connect the dots via a line, but you get the point of it's higher highs, but it's lower highs down here. Now, this one didn't last as long. This one lasted best part of just 12 months. Again, because it doesn't give us time frames. But you're right to point out, Steve, that it is there, and it is something that we should have a look at. With the stochastic RSI, I don't think there's really much of a divergence to necessarily see from that. What is interesting, I suppose, is that we sort of hit that peak level of strength not so long ago, and we formed sort of a lower high here before breaking. So that peak strength, if I can just draw a straight line, let me get rid of this, get rid of that. I'll also I'll keep it on there, but so that line there, I'm gonna have to draw it in different colors. Sorry, there's a lot of lines here. Hopefully you can still interpret it. And then we had sort of this. Oops, I've drawn one too many. This level here. So obviously the stochastic RSI is dropping down while the prices continue to go up. It's not particularly over that bigger time frame. With the stochastic, I can't even speak. It's taken into effect momentum there. So we are starting to see that breakdown here. Previous times we've seen the breakdown from the peaks, we have noticed either a drop in price or Bitcoin ranging whilst it resets. So, you know, again, we had this peak in March, we saw it come all the way down. Bitcoin's price was moving down. It moved from 70,000 to 50,000, which was huge when we felt it. It's only 20,000 in the grand scheme of things, but we can see that it kind of reset, and we had that break and that burst up. And then again, we hit that peak in and around the new year, and then it started to fall down. We ranged, bottom, shot back up. So, you know, don't be surprised if we do range and you do follow the stochastic RSI, that this starts to drop back down. The key is that when we get down here, we want to see it break. Don't get too excited if it comes up, you know, and then rejects off it. You want to see it break. You want to see it break with speed for that next leg up. Again, I don't have a time scale for when that happens, but it's certainly something to consider there. Anyway, we'll leave that as it is. And hey, we're already 30 minutes in and into the charting. So we're doing well for ourselves, getting through this as quick as we can. And yeah, so let's have a look at Bitcoin on, you know, a little bit more of the detail there. And one of the things that I didn't necessarily mention because I was waiting to get through to this chart, but again, look where the pullback came last week. So Friday we had that drop straight back down to the 50 EMA on the daily time frame. And then what's happened? We've recovered it. We recovered this vector candle, and then the 10 and the 20 EMA have rejected us back down. Today's candle's still live at the moment, but we are finding difficult, so we are finding support, should I say, on the 50 EMA. So, you know, as long as we can hold that, we don't mind hitting the 50 EMA. Nice little reset, something we've talked about for a while. Build some support off this, and then up and away we go. 10 and the 20, you know, we get through those relatively easy. But we just need to make sure that we can hold this level. Obviously, there are some vectors down here, and again, I talked about this on Friday, but where would it be? You know, when we had that move up, you know, these were the vector zones that we were drawing. We were looking at that one, we were looking at that one, and then if you remember, I was like, maybe we get this one, but I used to put a cross through it thinking we might not get that far. You now get rid of the replay. And look, we've taken those two. There's a small smidge of this one here, but those two there have been taken. And this one, which we may or may not get to, it's a bonus if we do, it's still left to go. So again, just why I keep these on the charts are good sort of indications of where things may end up ultimately taking us to. On the daily, I mean, the 200 EMA is not out of the question. And I know it's going to hurt to say it, but it's right at the bottom of this vector zone, and it's at 100K. I mean, we fall down to 100K, it's going to feel bad. We're going to get that pain that we were talking about in April, but it actually could be a pretty good level for turning around. And I've held off talking about that until we get, you know, closer to closing some of these vectors. Well, we're starting to close those now. We lose this 50 EMA, and then the conversations just need to be had with at least this in the conversation. But yeah, something to consider there. Again, if we throw on a fib from down here to down there, we can actually now see, look, we've come up. Again, they do seem to work out quite well. And it's the 382 that we've been bouncing off and find support. And now we're just messing around between the 382 and the 236. So again, we can kind of see why we're turning around on some of these points. Let's go down to a lower time frame, the 4 hour. Let's see what we've got here. And what I thought was interesting over the weekend, we had that fall away on Friday and then through Saturday, and then sort of back end of Saturday, Sunday, it just was like, you know, steady recovery. And when we look at Tower a little bit later on, you'll see that similar kind of thing. No vector candles necessarily forming, just steady recovery, you know, classic weekend activity, in my opinion. Weekend trap, which we talked about on Friday. Could this be a weekend trap recovery before we see the, you know, the continuation down? And when I talked about that dead cat bounce at the moment, you know, that sort of question of whether or not this is a dead cat bounce. Well, even if we just do a simple fib, I don't know where you want to take it. Let's just take it there. Yeah, down. Dead cat bounce, 50% back. Well, we just tipped just ever so slightly over the 50%, but that's kind of feels what it is. Rejected at the 50 EMA, and I'm continuing to fall back down. And so, you know, that could well be how we find ourselves hitting a little bit further down, just because we have recovered 50% of it, been rejected by the 50 EMA, start to continue on our way down. And it's a sad state of affairs. All but the 800, we are below at the moment, the 50 to 200, the 20 and the 10. 200 and the 50, at least the long way round, but give it a little bit more time and those two are going to cross over. We do naturally have vector zone here that we would look to recover at some stage. And again, you show me a vector zone in this area that we haven't recovered, so good chance we will. But as we point out in the daily, there's also these targets to the south, which we have to consider now. So a couple of more candles really need to play out just so we can kind of see how this direction is going to play out. But for me, right now, unless we can find sort of a bottom in the region that we're either in and the bounce there, or certainly down at sort of that 112, it kind of feels that's not it. And the reason I say that is in case we're forming some sort of W formation. But if we are, this is the neckline at 115,000, which let me just draw it with a straight line actually. That 115,000 in and around there, we need to be breaking this zone. So get through these vector zones, get through that 200, get through that 50 EMA. It's probably going to take a vector in itself and some increased volume to do that. And then we can make a move and start looking to regain the range that we were in at around about 118,000. But looking at the order book there, there's quite a lot of orders in and around, sell orders in and around there. And previously, I don't have the indicator on there. I was messing around with it a bit earlier, sort of having a look at sort of point of controls and areas of sort of large trading activity at 118,000. There was a lot of trading in and around there. So yes, that is a target towards, head towards, but it also could be resistance given that we are underneath it, and something to certainly look at. I mean, I don't know what else there is to see, but we will go down onto the 1 hour and then onto the 15, just in case there's anything else that's really painting that picture. I mean, again, we can kind of see a little bit better now that sort of, we are seeing some vectors here, but that sort of move up, rejection to come back down. Again, even if the last couple of hours, that move down, it's coming up. It's quite a steep angle that. I think we're going to 15 minutes, it's going to look like that could ultimately end up rolling over as well. I'm not really too bothered about that high test, so that low test on the 1 hour. Nice to see it does act from it, but you know, where that neckline is 115,300, it's right where the 200 EMA. So again, we need volume, we need speed, we need some good news, I suppose. It's going to help us move that through. 15-minute, here we go, that sort of angle there kind of suggests we just get a little bit tired. Candles are getting a lot tighter. Is this just going to be that next move down? Need to watch for that there. Okay, moving on to Tau, a bit tenser. Move on to the daily at least first. So just something else I've just put on my chart, a little bit of a reminder to myself. So, you know, typically when I sidestep, I'm only sidestepping between 25 and, I'll be honest, 50% of my pot. I've really kind of made that decision. If we get back up to 450-ish and we don't break this level, I think I'm going to do a full sidestep. Certainly a much larger one as we just continue in this sort of valley here. So that's just on my charts, just a little reminder for the level for me. We can kind of see this move down. And what's interesting with this move on the daily is actually we haven't formed a vector candle since the 22nd of July. So best part of, well, it has been 2 weeks, 2 weeks without a single vector candle. Even with all of this selling down here, just no vector candles, no sort of increased amount of selling pressure. So nothing for us to necessarily recover back from. So trying to have a look as to where this is going. And although we can eyeball it and suggest that there certainly wasn't a 50% retracement, you know, this fall of this magnitude down here on the daily, eating again through these vectors that we talked about on Friday. And again, we'll just show you here, these vectors here, it's taken those through. We've eaten up almost the full bit. This last one, we found an area to bounce on, but you know, we get back up to the 10 EMA, everything else is crossing in and around here, and we find that we've turned around again. And yes, this candle doesn't close, and on the daily I'd probably want to see a couple more, but right now it's kind of feeling like that was just a pullback over the weekend, and the bears feel like they're in control at the moment. So something really needs to happen to turn this around, and ultimately you could go back through bit tensor for the last 6 months, and this is a story that has been told, unfortunately, time and time again. So for me right now, I'm looking at the Gandalf line, 315, I already mentioned, but we've got the 800 EMA sort of sharking around in between there. Maybe we work through to close that vector level, but that's sort of the area that I'm looking at. I'm not interested in buying anything back until around about, I start at 320. I think that's my level. I held off not buying at 328, so it kind of feels like I should stick to that at the moment. 320, I'll start to buy some of this back in. And I really want to see how it reacts around that 315 level. We go down to the 4-hour time frame, and this rejection is coming a bit clearer now. So yeah, okay, we are falling with some vector candles here, which move down, vector candles. So here and here, recovered, vector candles down, recovered immediately, down, and then even the ones that we formed on the way back up, we've managed to close out. Yes, we've formed a bit of a vector candle there, but this move back down, it just feels like this is, this was a bit of seller's relief. We had so much selling, it's only a matter of time before some buying was going to happen, and then, head back down that way. Now, could we be looking at a double bottom? Absolutely. But right now, we've got to get a few more of these candles doing this before we can really suggest that and that are the double bottom there on the 4-hour. So yeah, just something to sort of pay attention to. I don't know if there's any fundamentals that's particularly driving bit tensors on, emissions rate or subnets having to sell or whatever. I've not really been keeping up to date on any of that. But for whatever reason, it's not being able to sort of stick the landing. And it's not on its own. We're going to look at some of our altcoins, and you'll see it's a very similar position there. We take it down onto the hourly. And I just don't really see anything that's sort of, appealing to me. Of course, yes, at some stage, I'd like to see those recovered. Of course I would. I'd expect to see those recovered. In fact, I mean, for the best part of a year and a half, we've been in this range, a year and a half, apologies, since April of this year. Where have I gone? December 23, we sort of lived in and out of this range that we're in. So, I do expect at some stage a move back up here. I just can't tell you when that's going to be. But as I say, if we get back up into those vector zones there, and let's say that is the top, I think that's just another indication for me that I'm going to look to try and do a bigger sidestep and try and sort of recover some of that. So yeah, but on the 1 hour, I don't think there's any really different picture there for me and where this is going. And I'm just going to wait, see how that one plays out. We get into Ethereum, and I'll take it onto the daily. And so we had that again move down on Friday, but what I would say with Ethereum and better positioning than Bitcoin and some of the other altcoins is, yes, we've had that move back down, but it's actually it's not fallen anywhere near. If you think over that same period, Bitcoin's gone all the way back down to its local all-time high there. Ethereum's still quite a bit above it. That local high was just under 2,900. We're still talking about 3,500 at the moment, and we actually only dropped down to as low as 3,350. So actually Ethereum has shown some strength despite the selling on the ETF, which, remember, that selling on the ETF actually happened there when Ethereum's price actually went up by $300. That's when the selling took place. So yeah, we're looking to see some sort of consolidation, and we're still within this range that we had at the local high. There was obviously a clean rejection in and around that 4,000 level, which has been a bit of a bogey level, a contentious level for quite a number of years now. But we're still sticking in and around the 20 and the 10 EMA. The 50 is creeping up on us, but it's getting closer to where it's actually not as big a drop should we actually get down and hit that level. So again, not too much to worry about there. The 4-hour picture, okay, so we lost the 50 on Thursday, came back down 200 quarters. We've bounced back up. Now we are, there is a clear lower high here, and we are coming back down. We've lost the 50 again. Maybe we do have that retest of 330. But if we do, and we can manage to stay above that, it's a good entry position for anyone that's looking to take a long. There's a vector candle that it needs to claim. And the sharpness of this move up from beginning of July has left an awful lot of vectors down here. I accept that. When I talk about vectors being reclaimed, it's when they've been ranging for a while. This is only ranging for a matter of 2 weeks. And this is the area of the range that we have formed for now. So this is the one where I expect vectors to sort of be recovered. We break the 200 EMA and we can start then talking about reclaiming these vectors and what that might mean. That's going to be painful for the market if Ethereum starts to bleed out like that. The rest of the alts are, and it probably means that Bitcoin dominance is flying up. And I'm also about to sneeze. I'm going to try and mute the microphone before I do. 1 hour. Again, we've just lost the 50, 200, and now the 800, which you would expect is where is down at 3358. The reason I say you expect that is because on the 4 hour, I'm talking about the 200. Obviously, it's just a multiple of 4 down to the hour. So that's going to be the 800. So that's where that one sits. Any others that are particularly interesting? I don't really think so. Bitcoin dominance on the lower time frames, I suppose. Let's have a look on the 4 hour. Bit of ranging, really, but you could argue maybe trending upwards. But what I would say is this just sort of, some sort of bearish pattern, if you will, and at some stage it's going to break, and then Bitcoin dominance is going to continue its move back down. Absolutely could do. We just have to wait for this one, unfortunately, to play out. Bitcoin dominance could get all the way back up to 63, which again is going to be painful for alts whilst it happens. But then maybe we get another little mini run on altcoins after that. The dollar on the daily, so had that bounce there. It's come back. It broke through the 50 EMA. It's come back down to the 50 EMA. It's kind of bouncing on it at the moment. It's not really in a position where I'm saying it's back into resurgence mode. It's in this sort of tightly packed range, actually. I suppose we probably need to give it a couple more weeks to see how this one plays out. But it has recovered and bounced off the low of 96. Back in the beginning of July when we started to see things coming along. NAS still climbing, S&P still climbing. Yes, okay, we've pulled back on both of those, but bought up pretty quickly. So I don't see that this is in a position where it's going to ultimately roll over yet. The Russell's not quite all-time highs, but it's getting there. Gold ranging, just sat waiting for its next move, which wouldn't surprise me if that next move is this, to be honest. But yeah, it's just for the last 3-4 months just sat in that position. People have kind of forgotten that it broke that 3,000 level. It seemed to have happened that long ago. Coinbase gapped down massively last week. I don't know if its earnings came out, but a huge gap down. We would expect that to be recovered at some stage, but a really big gap down, and it's continuing to fall. I think I'm going to have a look as to why that's happened, see if there's some issue with the earnings. But yeah, surprised to see that. Circle finally broken back down. I've been waiting for this for a while. I'm going to just keep waiting. I might just wait till a bear market, see how low it actually goes. But it's something that I want to add. MicroStrategy, they've announced a new initiative to buy another 4.2 billion, and the price dropped. But I'm sure that will recover. Nvidia, yeah, it made a recent all-time high, but it's sort of pulled back ever so slightly. Palantir, its earnings came out yesterday, or maybe it's today. No, it was yesterday. I presume it was good because it's gapped up massively. So expect some sort of pullback at some stage into that zone. TauX, I know some of you got involved in. I hate to say it, but I think that's where RT got involved in it. I don't follow it, don't really understand what's behind it or what's driving this price down. But yeah, Tesla again, just sort of indecision, not great earnings report. People not happy with Elon, etc. It's making some sort of spectral compression. We'll have to wait and see with that one there. I think that's probably it. I know it's only 50 minutes. Apologies if it's a little short. I haven't really seen any questions in the comments. So I think we'll probably just knock that one on the head. And let me just have a quick look at the poll. So thanks everyone for putting in. 25% of you don't hold any Bitcoin at the moment. 45% less than 5%. 5 to 25% 18, and 25% high is 9. I'd be in that letter category. But I do appreciate that. It'll all make sense come September for the cuddle when we go in and discuss that. I think tickets are still available. They'll probably be available via the website. I think you can bring someone along to it. and I have no idea how the numbers are. There's going to be some subnet owners there doing some talks. I'll be there doing a talk, crypto talk, as I always do. And then, yeah, we'll just be there for the social after. It's always good to catch up with everyone. I expect there to be a trading pub at 1 o'clock on Thursday. I'll be back on Friday to do another sort of update just with charting of where things currently sit. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your week. I'm conscious the last couple of weeks I've been a little bit bearish on price, but to be honest with you, since we made that all-time high of 123,000, we have been going down. It doesn't mean that the bull market is over, but there are opportunities there if you're just willing to take them. There's been some really good charting done by people in the trading section of Discord, so definitely check those out if you're just looking for a fresh view on things. You got any questions, as always, hit me up. Please, use the RT Avenger questionnaire to sort of send me some stuff in advance. Be more than happy to discuss anything in a bit more detail for those of you that do send them across. And we'll just leave the rest of that. As I say, enjoy the rest of your evening, enjoy the rest of your week. I'll speak to you all either on Thursday or on Friday. Cheers now.